improve her domestic situation. And with just 21 days to respond, she felt she had to plead guilty.
It's terrifying because, like, all you think is, well, if I don't pay this, are they going to put me in prison? And I've got 2 kids.
Under the Conservative government, various reviews looked into decriminalising non-payment of the TV licence fee and came to nothing. While some newspapers have recently claimed Labour intends to scrap licence fee prosecutions, Sky News understands that's not the case. Officially, all that's being said for now is that ahead of the next charter review, the government isn't ruling out making changes to how non-payment is enforced, but says it'll consult widely before making a decision.
The licence fee has, of course, always been the corporation's bread and butter. But given that 500,000 households cancelled theirs last year, there are some fundamental questions as to the sustainability of the current system. Questions that are making it increasingly hard for the bosses to justify still treating non-payment as a prosecutable offence when there arguably might be better ways to collect their cash without criminalising people like Claire.
TV licence prosecutions are dealt with via a system called the Single Justice Procedure. SJPs are basically a fast-track route through the justice system. Almost 31,000 people were prosecuted for the offence last year, and a disproportionate number of which, just over 73%, were women. The vast majority of cases processed by a single magistrate in private and without a hearing. And because of the way the system is designed, letters from defendants often go unread by prosecutors. Even the Magistrates Association says the system has flaws.
We're not talking here about throwing the whole system out, but the TV Licensing Authority should have to see all pleas and mitigations from defendants before those cases come before magistrates. And that will give the authority the opportunity to decide to withdraw those cases if they believe it isn't in the public interest to pursue them.
The SJP system itself was designed to fix delays, brought in because it's efficient and effective. But fast doesn't always equate to fair when people like Claire feel they have no option but to plead guilty. TV licensing says prosecution is always a last resort and that they've the ability to overturn a conviction and intend to contact Claire to review what happened.
All evidence is evidence, so if this person is vulnerable in any sort of way, like, they should look into that.
A single mother criminalised and now using her universal credit to pay a fine which she arguably shouldn't have been prosecuted for in the first place. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Well, Katie joins me now, and Katie, as I went into your report there, I said that women are disproportionately affected by this, and that story there seems to be an example that this model, you have to argue whether it is fit for purpose.
That's the thing. Certainly in 2024, you have to remember that this was brought in at a time when they were the only broadcaster, weren't they? The way that we consume TV now has entirely changed. The fact that they are still treating this as a criminal prosecutable offence compared to sort of the other way that we used to paying subscriptions, adverts, things like that. It is a system that almost sort of catches vulnerable people out. And the fact that it is seemingly intrinsically unfair, that it is a disproportionate amount of women that are affected this because of the behavioural aspect to it. They are more likely to answer the door at home. They're more likely to be the ones that are putting their names on the household bills as well. So it is a system that is weighted against women. And I think certainly coming in 2024, we have moved on as a society a lot. So I think certainly there is a lot of pressure and a lot of attention on the BBC as to how they can justify still keeping this as a criminal offence.
Yeah, in 2024, people are so used now to a subscription model. It remains to be seen what the BBC will look like in the future, but they are in discussions with the government about what they will look like in the future in terms of, the licence fee or another model. What options are there for the BBC?
Charter renewal is due in 2028 is the deadline that the BBC is working towards. And certainly I think in the past when they've been negotiating with the Tories, it's been the whole thing about whether the Conservatives have their own agenda to want to sort of bash the BBC a bit. Labour, though, seems to be sort of singing from a similar hymn sheet of saying that the BBC does really have to be looking again at this as an issue, because it does seem like just because we've been doing it this way for so many years, it doesn't necessarily make it the right way to do it. Look, a couple of years ago in France, they scrapped having their version of the licence fee and moved towards tagging it onto VAT. There are some countries where it's sort of combined with a household bill. The majority of countries, though, in Europe, for public broadcasters, it's financed by ads. And when you think, really, I mean, would it be that radically different? We're seeing sort of so many promos on the BBC for other BBC products.
Yeah.
Would it be that different for us to have a couple of ads on there?
Yeah, very good point. OK, Katie, thank you. Katie Spencer with that report on the BBC licence fee for us tonight. Now, Britain today agreed to hand over sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius following a long-running dispute. The deal will allow people displaced for decades to return home, while the UK retains the use of a military base on the archipelago's largest island. The agreement has drawn applause from the White House, but some say it actually weakens the UK's influence across the world. Sky's Matthew Thompson reports.
The picture-perfect Chagos Islands. But these serene white sands have been the subject of over half a century of furious controversy. Since the 1960s, Britain's control of this remote part of the Indian Ocean has been disputed by neighbouring Mauritius. The largest island, Diego Garcia, is home to a major US-UK military base. A handful of Chagos Islanders, long forced to abandon their homes, have fought a running legal battle to be allowed to return. It's been called Britain's last African colony, and now the UK has agreed to hand control to Mauritius.
Some
people thought that it might have been impossible for a small country like Mauritius to have achieved justice against superpowers. Despite all this, we remain true to our convictions to end colonisation in our country.
The deal keeps the military base intact, but some Conservatives say it sets a dangerous precedent.
Although the airbase, which is jointly UK-US operated, is maintained on a 99-year lease, the other outlying islands go back to Mauritian sovereignty. Now, there are many other countries which will be interested in a permanent base in the Indian Ocean, China being one of them.
And as for the islanders themselves, those we spoke to are furious.
It's a day of mourning for the Chagosian people, like myself, like the vast majority, because we've been excluded from those negotiations, and they decided the fate of the island, the future of the island, without even consulting the population, the Chagosian people, who are at the heart of this tragedy. They should be aware of that. So if talking about historic for who?
All of my grandparents, brothers, sisters, my mum was born there as well.
Many fled to the UK, having initially been sent to Mauritius, where they say they were treated like dirt. They're sceptical of ever being allowed home.
If I had a choice, I would go back home. This is not home. It isn't home. It will never be home. Even if I die here, it will still never be my home. Why didn't they just send us back?
So in spite of all the backslapping diplomacy, trouble looks set to continue in paradise. Matthew Thompson, Sky News.
A man has been arrested following a suspected acid attack outside a school in West London on Monday. Sky's Alice Porter has been following this story this week and joins me now. Alice, bring us up to date.
Well, a 35-year-old man was arrested in the early hours of this morning on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm. And it's after a teenage girl on Monday afternoon was apparently coming out of school. This was in West London. She was talking to a 6-year-old boy, and a man on an e-scooter came past and threw a substance over them, which particularly hit the 14-year-old girl. And it's understood that what was thrown on them was acidic in some capacity. Now, a teacher came out and tried to help, but also was injured, which really shows just how dangerous this substance was. Now, all three were taken to hospital, but the 14-year-old girl in question, she is still in hospital. And in fact, her father has set up a GoFundMe page wanting any donations towards her rehabilitation. But he's actually said that she had surgery this morning, and he's really concerned that she may be scarred for life. We understand that she may have life changing injuries to her face. You can see some of the horrific photos there from this suspected acid attack. Now, the other two individuals, the other boy and the teacher, they have both been discharged from hospital, but there was a manhunt that went on for quite a few days, really, of police desperately trying to find any information about this individual on the e-scooter who came past and threw this liquid on the two teenagers. But we understand that a 35-year-old man was arrested this morning.
OK, Alice, thank you. Alice Porter with the details of that story. This has come here on the UK Tonight after the break. A call for action over the number of female medics being sexually harassed at work. Also coming up, we'll discuss the devastating effects of dementia with the TV presenter Anna Richardson. And we'll hear from a British couple left stranded on their honeymoon after getting caught up in Hurricane Helene.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent. I've reported from around the world and around the UK.
I'm Mark Stone, I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, DC. And beyond the United States, from across the world, I report on the biggest stories.
I'm Stuart Ramsey and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
I'm David Blevins and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I remember some of the worst of the violence here.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, DC.
This conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Campaigners are calling on the Health Secretary to introduce additional protections for young female medics in the NHS. The group Surviving in Scrubs say more than 60% of nursing staff have been subjected to sexual harassment at work, and almost 1 in 3 female doctors have experienced unwanted physical contact. They're pushing for a culture change across the health service. Well, joining me now from Surviving in Scrubs, Dr. Becky Cox, co-founder, and medical student Katie Diss. Ladies, thank you so much for coming on the programme to talk to me about this tonight. I'll come to you first, Becky. You founded Surviving in Scrubs because you recognised a problem in the health service. Perhaps you could put it into perspective for us and talk to us about the scale of what we're looking at here.
Yeah, so thank you for having us. And as you say, this is a huge, broad issue that covers across healthcare. So you mentioned that a third of female medics have experienced a form of sexual physical conduct that was unacceptable. But we know that 90% of women doctors have experienced sexual verbal conduct, unwanted sort of sexist comments in the last 2 years. That's replicated across nursing, it's replicated across allied healthcare professionals, and it's replicated across students as well. And the recent campaign that we've been doing has sought to raise awareness of the experiences of students as a particularly vulnerable group working in healthcare.
Katie, how did you come to be in contact with surviving in Scrubs? Can you talk to us about some of the things you've heard, you've witnessed, you've perhaps experienced yourself?
Yeah, I think for me, really, it was about frustration of how commonplace it was that medical students were speaking amongst their friends about these stories that they'd experienced sexism or misogyny, even cases of sexual harassment and assault. And I think that's a really normalised conversation amongst students, but it's really not reflected in the teaching or the training or the education that we're getting. And I reached out to Surviving in Scrubs when I heard about them. And Becky and Chelsea have been amazing at getting involved and helping us set up the student campaign. So,
yeah, I mean, Becky, you're particularly focusing on the younger female workforce, and you mentioned medical students there, and there seems to be some kind of disconnect between the health service and medical schools in terms of if young women or if women in general are in a difficult situation at work, where do they go? Who's in charge of this? There doesn't seem to be a clear line that they can go down to report this, to call it out.
Yeah, I think it's particularly difficult for the younger generations who are still studying. So the students that we work with and ones that have told us about their experiences highlight this really tricky example where they're out working in an NHS hospital. A perpetrator might be employed by the hospital, but actually the student is under the care of a university. And in which case then, who does the student report to? Do they report to the university, to the hospital? Who has responsibility for looking after them? And it really feels like there's a lack of clarity over who should be prioritising and looking after students who are vulnerable. They're more likely to be subject to a difference in hierarchy. That power aspect of it comes hugely into this. And we really need to see that medical schools and NHS trusts who are responsible for the placements all take ownership of this issue to protect students.
Katie, this letter to the Health Secretary, what do you want him to do? Because, you're talking not just about sexual harassment, but you're talking about misogyny as well. And just looking at some of the statistics involved in, how many female doctors have experienced sexual harassment, but also 91% of women doctors have experienced some form of sexism within the last 2 years. You've laid this out to the Health Secretary. What's your want from him? What's your call to action?
I mean, I'd really love for him to get involved in the conversation and introduce this to medical schools. Like, I think, for me personally as a student, I can't see why the medical schools aren't signing it. I think this is the bare minimum. There are 10 points in the charter, and they're really the basics of what medical schools should be providing for students. And I think if he can get involved in that conversation, make them realise that would be an amazing step.
I mean, Becky, fair play to you and your co-founder for forming Surviving in Scrubs to give women somewhere to go. But of course, the elephant in the room perhaps is you need male support in this as well. Why is it just women speaking up and going, do you know what, this isn't okay, not just in the NHS, but in any workforce? Are you getting much support from your male colleagues on this?
Yeah, well, as you say, often the hard work does fall to the people who are affected by it in so many different circumstances. We are getting some support from male allies, but we really need to see a lot more visual representation. We need to see men at the top of healthcare organisations owning this problem, educating men as they come up through the healthcare workforce, so that standard is set for what is acceptable professional behaviour, calling it out when it's wrong and holding perpetrators to an account for what they're doing, for their behaviour.
Katie, what would your advice be to any young female medical professional just starting out in her career? And, every woman knows what it's like when they're starting out in their industry. Small fish in a big pond. Often when you start out, your bosses are male. A lot of your colleagues are male. What would you say to them if they find themselves in a situation like perhaps you and other members of Surviving in Scrubs did?
I think to be honest, I would give everyone a warning. I feel that working in the NHS, and especially as a student, has levels of sexism I've never encountered before. And I think students need to be aware of that before they enter the workplace. I think also that there is support in the right places if you know how to access it. And that's hopefully what this campaign is all about. It's about stopping students being in this limbo state that they don't know where to go. I think from my personal experience, once I was in the system and in the right reporting system, I've been really well supported, and people have been amazing in helping me, but it took so long to find the right channel. And so I think that would be my advice, that there are people there that want to help.
Katie, do you mind if I ask how old you are?
24.
24. And you're effectively saying to young women thinking of having a career in medicine to brace yourselves. The sexism is actually worse than, you know, you'll have experienced before. I mean, that's quite an alarming thing to hear, Becky.
Yeah, it's really worrying. We shouldn't have to warn younger students, women coming into healthcare, that this is the case. We should be able to say, actually, we've got this action plan, we've got leadership taking responsibility for this, and we are going to seek to end this problem rather than having to warn people going ahead. But I think at the moment, as circumstances are, we can see that this is highly prevalent and there is a risk that this could happen. But we need to see our leadership actually taking some action on this and taking ownership.
OK. Well, it's a very sobering but important way to end that interview, you know, to brace yourself before you enter the medical profession if you are a woman. Look, Becky Cox and Katie Diss, thank you very much for talking to us here on Sky News tonight from the campaign Surviving in Scrubs, asking the Health Secretary, the NHS and medical schools to take sexual harassment within the health service more seriously. Ladies, thank you.
Thank you.
Still to come here on the UK Tonight, I'm going to speak to TV presenter Anna Richardson about her new documentary laying bare the reality of living with dementia. Now, it is the UK's biggest killer. 1 in 3 of us will develop it in our lifetime, and there is no cure, making it one of the most feared health conditions, but one that is perhaps spoken about the least. I'm talking about dementia, a condition that devastates lives. Over 1 million people in the UK are living with some form of it, and that number is set to increase by over 40% by 2040, with an increasing number of people dying because of it. In a new documentary, TV presenter Anna Richardson is speaking about her dad's diagnosis in an effort to get people talking more openly about living with dementia, while exploring the myths, the hidden struggles, and the huge losses that come with the condition. I began my conversation with Anna by asking about why it was so important to raise awareness of her father's disease.
This is a national urgent conversation. Dementia is Britain's biggest killer. People don't believe that. It is true. It is a juggernaut that's coming down the road for all of us. It affects all of us. 1 in 3 people born today will go on to develop it, and it's only getting worse. So this is now, as far as I'm concerned, a national emergency, and this should be a national conversation.
And because this isn't being talked about enough, people don't get an idea of the scale of this. Over 1 million people in the UK have it. It's predicted that by 2040 that will go up 40% to 1.4 million. And people just think of it as something you get if you're an older person. But actually, there are so many different types of dementia, and that's something you want to highlight.
I think that we are not facing this because we tend to associate it with old age, mistakenly. Dementia is not an inevitability of old age. And we tend to ignore older people anyway in this country. There are over 100 different types of dementia. Some of them are genetic. A lot of them are lifestyle related. Dementia is end-stage brain disease.
This conversation is important for those affected by Alzheimer's because, you know, people tend to concentrate on the person that's living with Alzheimer's, but it affects their entire family, their friendship circle. It's such a big ripple effect. And I know that you come at this from a really personal point of view because your documentary, Love, Loss and Dementia, is about you and your dad talking to other families. Can you tell me about your dad? He was diagnosed with vascular dementia 7 years ago.
Yeah, this has been a really, really important thing that I've been pushing actually to do a film around dementia. Dad was diagnosed 7 or 8 years ago after having had a stroke. And it was only when he had his brain scans that we realised that he had parts of his brain that were basically dying because he'd been having several strokes over the last few decades. So we are losing him year by year, month by month, day by day. And so this is a really important conversation. But I do go on to meet other families as well who have different dementias and are at different stages of their journey. I live with a constant anxiety. I live with constant guilt because I don't live near my dad. He will call me often saying he needs help with something or that he needs to go to the doctor. I can't get there. I get calls in the middle of the night because my father's fallen and he's been left on the floor all night. I can't get there. It is horrific. So for carers, which often lands on the family's shoulders, actually. So for those people caring for that person, it is a huge burden. It's exhausting, emotionally, physically, financially. There's very little help out there. And it can split families as well. So, you know, this disease is very cruel and it has far-reaching tentacles in terms of the family and the community and society. It affects everybody.
Well, you want to start this really important, urgent conversation, as you said, Anna, to recognise how big this is. And the hope is that effective action will follow in terms of support for those living with Alzheimer's and their support network, and also research as well. What is it you want action to look like?
This needs to be a priority as far as the government is concerned because it is affecting the healthcare services, it is affecting social services, and it's affecting the economy. So we need the government to start taking action in terms of better care, better joined-up thinking, better cohesion between social care and healthcare services as well. So we need people really to start lobbying their local MP and to tell their story about how they are being affected by dementia.
Well, Anna, thank you. You've got so much on your plate, as so many families have when they have someone that's living with Alzheimer's or dementias, but you're putting more on your plate by trying to help others that are in this situation and get their voices heard and get some concrete action on this. So thank you for that, and thank you for taking the time to speak to us tonight, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, one of those to feature in Anna's documentary is Mary Whitaker, who's here with me now. Her husband, Richard, diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. Before we have a chat, let's take a look at the clip from the documentary.
Dr. Bailey, thank you so much for calling me back. It's been a bit of a build-up for a couple of days. So we had a massive scene in the car on the motorway, which was terrifying. So then last night, just pacing up and down all night, not getting into bed.
Really? Oh,
and
yes.
yeah, and has just been very, very, very angry with me. Yes. Because I was actually, for the first time, really quite scared. So I've put all the knives away, and I've never thought he'd harm me, but he really, really hadn't got a clue who I was.
Oh, Mary, that's difficult to watch, never mind to be in that situation yourself with your husband. A snapshot of what life has been like with Richard. Can I first of all start by asking how he is? Because during the course of that documentary, you see Richard living at home and you having to make that decision to move him into a care home.
He's very contented. I went and visited today, and I'm starting to feel relaxed when I go and visit him because I know he's really well cared for. And at first I used to be quite anxious about going to visit, thinking, what am I going to find? But actually every single time he's fine. He's washed and dressed and very well fed and has plenty of GP visits and nursing care. And he's very happy to be with me, and I'm very happy, and we have a little kiss and sometimes a little dance. But he doesn't really know who I am, and I just think he likes a bit of company. And I really like spending a bit of time with him. Yeah.
And that's changed from having to be his full-time carer, which, as we saw there in that clip, was stressful for you emotionally, physically, mentally. And it's important to talk about this because, you know, you and your family went through a long process of deciding what to do in those next steps, because it is a big decision. When you are a full-time carer, you put all that weight on your shoulders. When you look around for help, what is there and how difficult is it to put your hand up and ask for it?
It's really difficult to ask for help. I mean, just literally asking friends for help is really difficult. And I would say to anybody who knows somebody in our circumstances, don't say to them, you know, if you need a hand, give me a call. Because I'll never call you, you know. It's just say, get your diary out. When do you know, let's make a date, or I'm going to bring some food round or something like that, because it is very, very hard to ask for help. You know, you live with it day to day and you cope and you manage, you make little adjustments the whole time. And so you think you're coping, you know, and then suddenly it's 8 to 10 years have gone by and you realise that actually you're on your knees, very, very tired. Radar is on the whole time. You know, I'm on alert. I've been on alert for 10 years now. Even when I'm in bed, I'm on alert. Richard would wake up 4 times a night. You know, it's very wearing.
And these are the hidden struggles. People, families, partners, children don't talk about what's going on behind closed doors when they're living with someone with dementia. You have been very brave and come out and spoken about it openly and sought help. 1 in 3 of us are going to have some form of dementia. That's a startling statistic. Should people be planning for this? Did you plan for this? What have you had to do to be able to look after your husband over the last decade?
I would say absolutely. People, young people in their 30s and 40s should actually start thinking, how am I going to handle this if and when it hits? Maybe not me, but maybe somebody very close to me. I didn't know anybody with dementia. We didn't have it in the family. I wasn't expecting it at all, and it was completely and utterly unprepared for. And I had to learn on the hoof and seek out all the information. And it's tricky. And I think everybody who works within the dementia world will agree with me that navigating the system on a local level is very, very difficult because there's masses of information out there. You know, you go into the internet and you just think, wow, there's this charity and that charity. great. But when you tap into it, your local charity, your local area, and find out what you've got, it can be a very different picture, and it's hard to navigate. And every single person I know has said to me the same thing. Getting the information is very difficult.
And you were paying, correct me if I'm wrong, £27,000 a year for 15 hours of help a week. I mean, in general, we are a nation that doesn't like talking about death, old age, let alone preparing for it, and the health conditions that are associated with old age. I know dementia, you want to bust the myth that isn't just something about old age. It can happen earlier than that. And as I said, you know, it affects 1 in 3. But what do you want to say to people about how to start talking about this? Because as you said, even though you were going through the worst of it, you found it difficult to ask for help.
I think the thing to do is to start asking, perhaps asking your local MPs what they feel about it and how they feel about, you know, if it were to happen to them, you know, and their family. I mean, I feel sort of financially eviscerated, really. You know, I have no idea what my future financially is, and I have to do this. We've sold our house. We're hemorrhaging money at this because we have to, and I don't quite know what people can do other than address it and start thinking about it. And actually, if people started going, wow, this is really serious, you know, I don't want to work for the next 20 years only to start hemorrhaging it away. Perhaps we need to put pressure on to have this whole system looked at from the ground up.
Well, Mary, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us. And I'm glad to hear that Richard was OK. There can be good days and bad days, as we know, with people in dementia, but I'm glad that Richard seems to be having quite a few good days at the moment, and as a result, so are you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming to see us. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Still to come on the programme, tributes are paid to anti-racism campaigner and founder of Kick It Out, Lord Ouseley, who has died at the age of 79. And coming up, I'll speak to the British couple stuck for days with no food, running water or electricity when their honeymoon was hit by Hurricane Helene.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours, and we're going to take it back.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power. Now, freedom! There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes, torrential rain and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued with its ultimatum to the people of Ashkelon, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Well, David is here with the sport, and there was sad news from the world of sport today. The anti-racism campaigner and the founder of Kick It Out, Lord Ouseley, has died at the age of 79, and what a trailblazer he was.
He really was, yeah. He passed away after a short illness, and, I mean, trailblazer is the word, SJ, because, you know, the way that football has been for a number of years, but to be able to tackle one of the real scourges of the game and to do it with such tenacity. No one had really done that before. When he founded the charity, I mean, it used to be known as Let's Kick Racism Out of Football before it became Kick It Out. In 1993, he was chair of it for 25 years, and then it was renamed Kick It Out over that time, and it adopted a broader brief, not just beyond racism, you know, tackling any form of discrimination, really. Also had other roles. So he sat in the House of Lords as a crossbencher. He retired from that 5 years ago. He served as chief executive of the Race Equality Commission too. And I mentioned like, how football has developed, how things like social media has developed. This problem has become more and more complex. And these challenges remain and also get more complex, but he was such a driving force, not just addressing them, but tackling them, taking them on head on. There have been plenty of tributes, as you can imagine. Kick It Out themselves said he was a titan in tackling discrimination in football, a fearless advocate for underrepresented and disadvantaged communities. And they say we owe him a huge debt of gratitude and vow to continue that legacy for the benefit of future generations. So you can see the benchmark he's set, but obviously wanting to continue that work. The FA say they're extremely saddened to hear about the passing of Lord Herman Ouseley. And also, us at Sky Sports, I mean, we have a partnership with Kick It Out, especially, you know, after George Floyd's death in the US. We decided to buddy up with them. And, yeah, I think, you know, we also share those same feelings and also share our condolences with the family and friends of Lord Herman Ouseley. OK, so that's one of the stories that we're covering today. Also, lots of European football to bring up to date with as well.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Tea at the cricket. For many, it's as important as the action on the pitch. Egg and cress sandwiches, tea, scones and cake. But that's not the tradition everywhere.
So, here we go. It's chicken. Oh, it's chicken.
In the summer, the ECB launched their Taste of Cricket campaign, celebrating diversity at clubs around the country. This event in London even had a touch of glamour.
Roll up for Carl's jerk chicken. You think about the diversity in cricket, all the countries that are involved with that. To just have to say, what do you do for afternoon tea? What do you eat? Most people think of cucumber sandwiches or a bit of egg and cress. And then suddenly you come to the Shepherd's Bush cricket ground where we are today, and it's all about jerk chicken and wonderful Jamaican patties and stuff.
For cricket bosses, this is just one small step in rebuilding the damaged reputation of the game and making it open to everyone.
Cricket has had a lot of issues around discrimination, ethnicity, race, gender, and we were trying to find ways to bring communities together, create some more trust, not suggesting for a second that we put on some community events and then all of cricket's issues are resolved. But alongside all of the policy changes, I think it's really important that these community events that celebrate people, celebrate all of the different communities that exist within cricket, are still really important to do at the same time.
For Club Life member Carl Menzies, a day watching the cricket.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Now, my next guests were honeymooning in North Carolina when they found themselves at the centre of a disaster zone as the US state was hit by Hurricane Helene. Chris Playfoot and Rita Ritter spent days stuck in a mountain cabin surrounded by landslides and washed-out roads. They say they had little food, no water or electricity, and eventually had to be rescued by a SWAT team. Well, I'm very pleased to say Chris and Rita are safe and well in Atlanta and join us now to tell us their remarkable story. So the plan was to elope to the United States and spend your honeymoon being outdoorsy. You went to North Carolina and it started with your car breaking down, which was the first sign of trouble.
Exactly, yeah. So we managed to fix the car and then we changed our route, and then that's why we ended up near Asheville, North Carolina. We were going on a climbing trip, and yeah, we ended up in the middle of the storm there, and we had to book a mountain cabin somewhere, and this was the spot. The footage you see there, that's just 1 minute down the road from the mountain cabin. In the middle of the night there on the Friday morning, we heard the landslide. And this was the result. So, yeah, this truck got completely wiped out, which blocked our exit from the cabin.
And there was water surrounding the cabin as well, 2 rivers forming on either side of the house. There was a landslide, as you said, which took out that truck. You couldn't actually leave the house. You were there for 3 days. What was going on when you were in there? Were you able to call for help?
So eventually, when the storm subsided, we were able to leave the house. So we weren't stuck in the house for the whole 4 days. We're very lucky because cell phone service went out. But luckily, we had a Garmin InReach, which meant it's a satellite texting device. So when we realized that we were in danger, we were able to send a text to my mother with our location and tell her that we will check in every 4 hours. And if she doesn't hear from us, to please call for help.
Yeah.
Did you think it was that bad?
Yes. On the first day, on the Friday morning, we had no idea what was happening. We had 0 power. Yeah, it was.
The thing that frightened us was the rivers that formed overnight when first light came that we could see, and the landslide. When we saw that landslide, within eye shot of where we were staying, that's the moment where we thought, wow, we think we might be in danger here.
And how were you eventually rescued? Because you endured this for 3 days. I mean, we're looking at the remarkable pictures that you took while you were there of the damage that surrounds you. I mean, so terrifying to be stuck in the middle of a hurricane. What was it like when you eventually rescued, and how did that play out?
So we were actually moving around on the mountain before the rescuers actually arrived. We could get out, and we'd kind of liaised with the neighbours, who were absolutely brilliant. I say we had like our hurricane parents up there. Jackie and Matt especially, they really helped us out. They provided us with some food, provided us with some water, and they really made the whole experience a lot more palatable.
Yeah, them and other neighbours.
Lots of other neighbours on the mountain as well.
A big shout out to Jackie and Matt as the rescue teams arrived to come and get you. A big shout out to them on Sky News. Well, look, you're in Atlanta now. Enjoy your city break honeymoon and stay safe. Thank you so much for telling us your story. We wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.